On July 8th, the Chicago Blackhawks dropped a piece of news that changed everything. Connor Bedard, their franchise center, the player this entire rebuild was built around, had just come out of surgery. His left shoulder torn, repaired, done for 4 months. And here's the part nobody saw coming. This injury landed at the single worst possible moment for Bedard's future in Chicago. Because 2 weeks earlier, something happened across the league that had already put every general manager on alert. A 21-year-old center, someone Bedard has outplayed at every stage of his career, just became the highest paid player in hockey. His name is Leo Carlsson, and the contract he signed just blew the roof off what a young star can demand. This is the story of how a shoulder injury and a record-breaking contract collided to create one of the tensest standoffs in the NHL right now. Let's start with the ordinary version of this story, the one everyone expected heading into July. Connor Bedard was the first overall pick in 2023. He arrived in Chicago as a savior, a generational scoring talent expected to drag a rebuilding franchise back into relevance by sheer force of skill. Chicago had not made the playoffs in years. The roster was thin, the fan base restless, and the front office had spent seasons stockpiling picks and prospects while losing on purpose, all building toward this one moment. The night Bedard's name was called first overall, it felt like the rebuild finally had its centerpiece. He delivered 203 points in 219 games, 75 goals, a Calder Trophy as Rookie of the Year, flashes of brilliance that made even rival fans stop and admire what they were watching, highlight reel goals from impossible angles, passes that seem to bend around defenders, the kind of player broadcasters build entire game previews around. But this is also a player whose young career has been shadowed by bad luck. A broken jaw in his rookie season, suffered taking a face-off with 1 second remaining in a game the Blackhawks were already losing. A separated right shoulder last December that he chose to play through rather than have surgery, missing about a month before returning less than fully healthy. And now, a torn left shoulder that required the operating table. 3 serious injuries, 3 calendar years, none of them his fault, all of them piling up. Heading into this summer, Bedard was set to become a restricted free agent. His entry-level contract, 3 years, $2.85 million total, expired on July 1st. It was time for Chicago to pay their franchise player like one. General manager Kyle Davidson has been in this seat before, negotiating extensions for a rebuilding roster, but nothing on this scale. Bedard is not just a good player Chicago wants to keep around. He is the face of the franchise, the reason season ticket packages sold out again, the singular asset the entire rebuild was staked on. And that should have been simple. Kyle Davidson had been saying for weeks that talks were ongoing, but he would not comment on numbers publicly. That is standard. Boring even. The kind of quiet negotiation that usually ends in a press conference and a smiling photo op, the player in a new jersey holding up a piece of paper, everybody happy. But then on June 20th, something happened in Philadelphia that nobody in Chicago was prepared for. The Flyers tendered an offer sheet to Leo Carlsson, a restricted free agent forward for the Anaheim Ducks. Offer sheets are rare in the NHL. Teams almost never use them because the compensation required if the original team declines to match can be devastating, and because the original team almost always matches anyway, making the whole maneuver pointless theater. But Philadelphia decided the risk was worth it. 5 years, $90 million, an $18 million annual cap hit. Let that number sit for a second. $18 million a year for a player who has never averaged a point per game in a single NHL season. Anaheim had one option if they wanted to keep him: match the offer sheet exactly or lose Carlsson and receive draft picks as compensation. Instead, the Ducks matched. Carlsson stayed, and in doing so, he instantly became the highest paid player in the entire National Hockey League, surpassing former MVPs, former Norris winners, players with multiple Stanley Cup rings. Now, here is why this matters so much to Bedard and why it changes the entire conversation happening inside the Blackhawks front office. Leo Carlsson was picked 2nd overall in the same draft class as Bedard. 2 players taken 1 pick apart, forever linked by draft order, forever compared by fans and analysts trying to figure out who the franchises got right and who they got wrong. Bedard has been better by a wide margin. More points, more goals, more highlight reel moments, more proof that he is a genuine #1 center, not just a very good complementary piece. Anyone who has watched both players over the last 3 seasons would tell you, if forced to pick one to build around, they are picking Bedard every time. That is not a knock on Karlsson. He is a legitimately good young player, big, skilled, still developing, and Anaheim clearly believes he is a future foundational piece worth building around for a decade. The Ducks did not match his offer sheet out of panic. They matched it because they see a player who is going to keep getting better, and they were not willing to let a division rival walk away with him for the cost of draft picks. That is a defensible hockey decision, but defensible does not mean cheap, and it definitely does not mean it happened in a vacuum. The $18 million number exists now permanently as a real contract on a real salary cap sheet, and every agent representing a young star is going to reference it in every negotiation going forward. That is simply how these markets work. One team's aggressive bet becomes the entire league's new floor. So if Karlsson is worth $18 million a year, what is Bedard worth? That question was already sitting on the table in Chicago's front office when the second bombshell landed July 2nd, Vancouver, an off-season skate, the kind dozens of NHL players run every summer with friends and training partners, low stakes, no cameras, just guys staying sharp before training camp. Buffalo's Zach Benson was there, Vancouver's Arshdeep Bains was there, San Jose prospect Luca Cagnoni was on the ice too, and then Bedard lost his footing and crashed hard into the boards. Video of the moment surfaced almost immediately. You can hear him in pain as he skates off, clutching his left shoulder, the injury unmistakable even without a diagnosis yet. Within hours, the clip was everywhere, fans speculating, reporters calling sources, everybody trying to figure out how bad it actually was. 6 days later, the announcement came: surgery. Successful, according to team physician Dr. Michael Terry, but a 4-month recovery window, which means Bedard is projected to miss the start of the 2026-27 season entirely. With the league moving to an 84-game schedule and an earlier late September start date, that timeline pushes his return into November. Chicago will open the year without their best player for a second consecutive season. Now think about what this means for the negotiating table. Before the injury, Bedard's camp had every reason to point at Karlsson's number and say, we deserve at least that much, probably more. According to reporting from the fourth period, Bedard is believed to be seeking something closer to Kirill Kaprizov money, somewhere around $17 million a year. Chicago, meanwhile, is reportedly anchored closer to 10 to 12 million. That gap was already enormous. $7 million a year multiplied across a long-term deal is not a rounding error. It is a fundamental disagreement about what Bedard is worth to this franchise and about how much risk Chicago is willing to absorb. And now Chicago has fresh ammunition to slow the whole process down. To really understand how unusual this situation is, it helps to zoom out and look at how restricted free agent negotiations normally work in the NHL. Most of the time, a young star and his team quietly agree on term sheets months before anything becomes public. The player wants term security and a fair share of the cap. The team wants cost certainty and protection against a bad injury year. Under normal circumstances, these conversations happen calmly, away from cameras, and the final numbers rarely shock anyone. What makes the Bedard situation different is that 2 separate shocks landed on top of each other in the span of about 2 weeks. First, Karlsson's deal rewired the market from the outside. Then, 6 days later, Bedard's own body forced a completely unrelated variable into the equation. Negotiators do not usually have to deal with one unprecedented event during a contract standoff, let alone 2. Agents around the league are reportedly watching this situation closely, not just because of Bedard specifically, but because of what it will signal about how much value teams place on term security versus raw talent. If Chicago ends up paying close to Bedard's ask despite the injury, it tells every other agent in the league that recent shoulder surgery does not meaningfully move the needle on a superstar's price tag. If Chicago successfully negotiates a discount or insists on a shorter bridge deal instead of a long-term commitment, it becomes a blueprint that other front offices may try to copy the next time a similar situation arises. If you have been following the Bedard situation and want to see how another young star's contract standoff played out this offseason, the Werenski trade saga is a wild follow-up watch, and it is on screen right now. Do you pay a player entering a contract on the exact terms discussed before he needed shoulder surgery for the third time in 3 years? Or do you use this moment to reset the conversation, to build in protections, to ask for term flexibility that reflects the injury history? Neither side has said this publicly. Nobody in that front office is going to stand in front of a camera and say, we are worried about his body breaking down. That would be cruel, and it would be terrible negotiating strategy to reveal your hand that clearly. Public relations departments do not release statements like that. But behind closed doors, every team doctor, every cap strategist, every agent involved is running the exact same math. But the timing speaks for itself. A max-level contract ask arriving in the same summer as a third major injury is a very different conversation than a max-level ask arriving off the back of a clean, healthy, dominant season. Agents know this, general managers know this, and both sides know the other side knows it too, which makes every phone call between them a quiet game of chess. Here is what makes this genuinely fascinating and why it deserves to be called a bombshell rather than just an unfortunate injury update. This is not simply a story about a player getting hurt. It is a story about how one contract signed by a completely different player on a completely different team can ripple outward and change the leverage calculus for a player who was never involved in that deal at all. That is how the modern salary cap works. Nothing happens in isolation anymore. Carlson's number did not just affect Anaheim's salary cap. It reset the market ceiling for every young center in the league who believes he belongs in that tier. Bedard's camp knows this. Chicago knows this. And now, with the injury layered on top, both sides have new leverage points to push and pull on before a single word of a formal contract offer is exchanged publicly. Let's talk about what happens on the ice while all of this plays out, because the on-ice consequences are just as important as the financial ones. Frank Nazar and rookie Anton Frondel are now expected to shoulder significantly more responsibility down the middle, filling the void left by Bedard's absence. Both are talented. Neither is Connor Bedard. The Blackhawks were a rough 5 wins, 6 losses, and 1 overtime loss during Bedard's absence last season, and their record actually got worse after he returned, going 11 wins, 21 losses, and 7 overtime losses over the remainder of the year, as his production dropped from 1.42 points per game before the injury to 0.82 points per game after it. That is the brutal reality buried inside this story. Even when Bedard has returned from injury in the past, he has not immediately been the same dominant player. If that pattern holds again, Chicago could be staring down a slow, painful start to the season and then a slow, painful reacclimation once their franchise center finally steps back on the ice in November. Coaches can plan around a missing player. It is much harder to plan around a player who is physically present but not yet himself. Meanwhile, the front office still has to figure out how to pay him. Every week without a signed deal is a week where speculation fills the silence, where fans start asking whether this drags into training camp, whether it becomes a real distraction, whether either side starts to feel public pressure to move faster than they are comfortable with. There is no indication, as of this recording, that talks have broken down. Both sides appear to still be negotiating in relative good faith, and nothing suggests Bedard wants to leave Chicago or that Chicago wants anything but to build around him long term. This is not a Werenski situation where trade demands and no movement clauses are on the table. This is simply two sides trying to agree on a number with a lot more complicating factors than usual. But good faith and a finished contract are two very different things. And every week this drags on without a new number on paper, the questions get louder. Is Chicago stalling because of the injury? Is Bedard's camp holding firm on Kaprizov-level money regardless of what just happened in Vancouver? Does an 8-year maximum length deal even make sense for a player who has now had 3 significant injuries before his 21st birthday? Or does a shorter bridge deal make more sense for both sides, letting Bedard prove his health and his production before locking into a decade-long commitment? None of these questions have public answers yet. What we do know is this: Bedard turns 21 on July 17th. He will spend his birthday recovering from surgery, still without a new contract, watching from the sideline as free agency reshapes the market around him. A milestone birthday spent in a sling instead of on the ice, negotiating his future instead of celebrating it. And when he finally does return to the ice in November, every shift he plays will be watched under a microscope, not just for performance, but for health. Because in a league that just decided an unproven 21-year-old center is is worth $18 million a year. The price of a proven one, even one who is currently hurt, only continues to climb. If Bedard comes back strong, Chicago's leverage evaporates instantly. If he struggles again the way he did after his last injury, the entire conversation shifts in the other direction. Either way, this is no longer just a contract negotiation. It has become a referendum on how much an injury history should matter when a generational talent is the player asking to get paid. The rest of the league is watching too, because whatever number Bedard eventually signs for will become the new comparison point for the next young star who thinks he deserves Carlson money, and the star after that, and the one after that. There's also a human dimension to this that gets lost in the spreadsheets and cap calculations. Bedard is still not even old enough to legally rent a car in most states, and he has already broken his jaw, torn one shoulder, and separated the other, all while carrying the expectations of an entire rebuilding franchise on his back. Every summer that should be about rest and preparation has instead become about recovery and negotiation. That is an enormous amount of pressure for anyone to carry, let alone someone barely old enough to be considered a full adult. And Chicago, for all the criticism the front office might absorb during a drawn-out negotiation, is in a genuinely difficult spot too. Committing 8 years and well over $100 million to a player with this specific injury pattern is not a decision any general manager makes lightly, regardless of how talented that player is. The easy narrative is to paint this as a stubborn team, lowballing its franchise star. The more complicated truth is that both sides are trying to protect themselves from very real, very different risks, and neither of them is entirely wrong to do so. If you think Chicago should pay Bedard whatever it takes, or if you think this injury changes the math entirely, drop your take in the comments. This story is not over. Subscribe so you do not miss where it goes next.